I never thought I needed to change. I knew what the expectations were, that I would grow up, marry a nice girl, and have a house and the picket fence and the dog in the yard. But I knew that wasn't that wasn't in my picture at all. So my name is Michael Saul. I'm a filmmaker and director. I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, in the 50s and 60s, 70s. Very Catholic family, oldest of three. My parents were wonderful people. My father was a weekend artist, and my mother loved movies and musicals and that sort of thing. And so I got all of that music. So I was in that kind of an environment, and it was wonderful. I always knew I was different from all of the other kids at school. I didn't know how or why. I was kind of a soft boy, and I think that caused issues between my father and I. He always wanted me to be, more macho and do more macho things. But I always was moving toward theater and art and the softer side of the world. So I didn't always get along with other kids. I found a few friends that I had were sort of like-minded. And I had some crushes on girls when I was in elementary school. And looking back, they were pretty much the butchest girls in the school, as it turns out. One of them even had the last name Dick. So that was probably an omen. It wasn't until I got into junior high school that, obviously, when you're adolescent and you're starting to think about sex and sexual things, that I realized I was really different. But I didn't know anything about it, really. I mean, I was obviously called a queer, I was called a fag, and I didn't really know what that meant other than the fact that I wasn't like all the other boys. My parents didn't tell me anything about sex, except my mother one day sat me down and told me why girls have their period. I don't know why. I'm sure she was trying to get to a point where I understood that I could make a girl pregnant or something like that, but it didn't have any, sort of context. And I didn't ask my parents about sex because, here again, being the Catholic family, we didn't talk about those things. And even though they were becoming more of a social thing, we had television shows that were talking about sex and Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In and things that were being very outward and public about talking about these things. We didn't talk about them in the family. So their plan of me asking questions just didn't work out. So by the time I was in junior high, I started having crushes on other boys. And they were friends and people who I got along with and who wanted to play around or were curious as well. And that was all fun. But I took it much more seriously than they did, typically. And by the time I was probably 14, I was just totally in love with one of my friends, who coincidentally was a Boy Scout in my father's troop. My father was the scoutmaster of our church. So that didn't help that I was around all of these, very excitable boys all the time. But I still didn't really know where I fit in. And so at one point, I understood what the word homosexual meant. Or I'd heard the word homosexual, but I didn't really know what it meant. I thought I did. But my mother had put very conveniently over the stereo, because I was always listening to music, she had a bookshelf, and she put, in one of the books was something about human sexuality, which I thought was really out of place for her. But I'm sure she put it there purposely so that I would pick it up and start looking through it, which I did. One day I looked up homosexual, and just the lights went off. It was like, I finally realized where I fit into the world. It wasn't a very positive description of homosexuality, but at least I understood that I wasn't the only person who was feeling these feelings. And that was such an amazing feeling. And I went on to tell this boy that I was in love with that I thought I was gay. And he didn't waste any time in telling me that he wasn't. So that was my first sort of love experience. But it was really important to me because it sort of set me off on this journey. But I didn't really come out then. We didn't really know. I didn't really know what that meant, but I knew I couldn't really tell most of the people in my life. I ended up telling my best friend in high school. When I got into high school, I ended up telling him, and he told me that he was gay. So we've been lifelong friends. He and I actually moved to California together at the same time because we both wanted to move to California. I started making films when I was in high school, and I realized that art was my saving grace, really, to express my feelings about how I saw the world. And I made some films that were sort of out there and very experimental, and the people raised an eyebrow too, but it was really great to have an outlet where I could tell my stories. And that's how I use my art today. After high school, I just got some jobs, and we saved up enough money so we could move to California. We moved to San Francisco. This was 1979. And it was very exciting there, but I didn't quite know what to do with the California experience, and it didn't quite work out the way I wanted to, so I moved back to Ohio for a while. I wanted to go back to California, and so that's what I did. In '84, I moved back to California, back to San Francisco. And that was really when I came out to society and came out into the world. And coincidentally, it was the years where AIDS was in our world. And so I had just arrived basically at the gay mecca of the United States just in time to be, hit with the AIDS epidemic. And it was frightening. Socially and sexually, that was the time of my life where I really came out. I stayed in San Francisco for a number of years. About 1990 is when I moved to the Los Angeles area. And that was sort of a whole other coming out in West Hollywood and being part of the scene there and having other boyfriends and long-term relationships and that sort of thing. And I came to LA initially to pursue film and show business, and it was exactly the time when the independent film movement was starting to happen. And that was a great relief to me because I'd had one experience working on a Hollywood film and knew after that experience that was not what I wanted to do. And so independent meant that we could make films with video cameras. We could make films with anything. And then there was a market for these films, and that was what was interesting. So I fell right into that and started making gay-themed films for a portion of the film industry that was now open to that. They were commercially viable. So that was great. I made my first feature, True Love, in 2004. And have been working consistently since. I'm still making films and still telling my stories of being a gay man. And it's brought me to a time in my life where I've never been happier. I have a partner of, we're in our 11th year now, who's an amazing, amazing person and is the person I always wanted to meet. And I'm working with fantastic professionals who are at the top of their game. And I never thought at this time in my life I would be doing this, that this would be my place in life. So I'm very excited about where I'm at and where I'm going.